Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is Monday, the 24th of March, 2025. These are the stories that we will be deciphering during the course of the show. We'll begin with the statement of the special envoy to Afghanistan, Ambassador Mohammad Sadiq Khan, who says that peace and progress in Afghanistan is necessary for regional stability. This comes in the wake of his visit to Afghanistan, where he met representatives of the Afghan interim government, including the interim foreign minister, Mr. Muttaqi. The fact is that there are many issues that have been discussed between the two sides and need to be discussed between the two sides as well, looking at the general paradigm of relationship between the two countries, and of course with particular reference to the security situation. We'll be highlighting different aspects of this visit in our first show, our first segment rather. In our second segment concerns Palestine, the situation in Gaza. Today is day 534 since the conflict began, and the number of brutalities continues to increase. On Saturday, there were more than 20 people who were butchered by the Israelis. Then recently, there are about 19 people who've been butchered. The total comes around to more than 600 now that have been mercilessly killed by the Israeli forces. They say this is to target Hamas, but the majority of the people who are being targeted are not Hamas. In fact, are civilians, mostly women and children. To add to that is the humanitarian situation as far as Gaza is concerned. This has been 3 weeks since the Palestinians are devoid of basic aid necessities from entering the region, from entering the Gaza Strip, whether it be food, water, medicine, and so on and so forth. To add to that is the situation of the hospitals as well, which is despicable to say the least, because A, there's no electricity, B, there are no facilities, C, they are being bombarded by the Israelis. This and more is going to be discussed in our second segment. Then finally, we are going to talk about the World Tuberculosis Day that is being observed across the world, including in Pakistan. The theme this year is Yes, We Can End Tuberculosis, Commit, Invest, Deliver. This is a bold statement, and of course looking at 2025, when tuberculosis should have been a disease that should have been completely eliminated, there are still traces of tuberculosis across the world, and this is what needs to be the global resolve, to end tuberculosis. This is the whole lineup for today. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns Pakistan-Afghanistan relations, the issues that exist between the two countries, specifically with regards to terrorism, and of course the recent visit of the special envoy to Afghanistan, Ambassador Mohammad Sadiq Khan. We've been joined by two guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. In the studios, we'll be joined by Jauhar Saleem Sahab. Jauhar Saleem Sahab is a former foreign secretary and also the president of the IRS. Thank you very much, Jauhar Sahab, to have joined us. Online, we've been joined by Amina Khan. She's the director of CAMIA at the ISSI in Islamabad. CAMIA, of course, is the Center for Afghanistan, Middle East and Africa. And ISSI is the Institute of Strategic Studies. Thank you very much, Amina, to have joined us. We'll begin with you, sir. Pakistan Special Envoy to Afghanistan, Ambassador Mohammad Sadiq Khan, yesterday says peace and progress in Afghanistan is necessary for regional stability. He also emphasizes on the economic interests between Pakistan and Afghanistan that are intrinsically linked with one another. Not the first time such a statement has been made, but looking at the situation that confronts both the countries, specifically Pakistan vis-a-vis security and the issues related to security, how do you feel this visit would prove to be? Will it prove to be a game changer? Will it prove to be some kind of a deterrent as far as terrorism emanating from Afghanistan into Pakistan is concerned? Will the Afghan side understand? I mean, there are so many things to understand and to ask, but let's begin from the very beginning.
Sure. Ambassador Sadiq, our special envoy on Afghanistan, is a very capable diplomat, a dear friend, eminently qualified to interact with the Afghans. He was ambassador there for 5 years almost, has very good linkages and contacts there. When he was there last, some time ago, during that visit, we saw there was some kinetic action which was also taking place from Pakistan side. So that visit was mad a bit and was not as productive. This time the tone and tenor of the talks that we have seen so far, they're much more positive. Ambassador Sadiq is impressing upon the Afghan interim administration authorities. He had a meeting with the Foreign Minister Muttaqi and also the Commerce Minister. And he's impressing upon them the fact the two countries, like you said, they are intrinsically interdependent. There's so many linkages of culture, of faith, of shared histories, like the shared ethnicities, and so many things are common between these two countries. And yet we find ourselves in a situation where we are facing a grave threat of terrorism emanating from Afghanistan in terms of their support, or at least, permissibility to those terror groups who are operating from there. So that has been a great contentious issue, which has marred the relations, let me be candid on that, in recent times. Pakistan was Afghan's largest trading partners, still is one of the largest, if not the largest. We are the closest route they have for trade to the sea. In many other ways, we are critical for their security, their stability, their economic sort of stability as well, their economic development, trade. So they need to have good relations with Pakistan. It's a sine qua non for Afghanistan. Similarly, we also believe that for Pakistan it's very important, very essential to have good relations, very cooperative, close and cooperative relations with Afghanistan. And despite that, the two countries find themselves in a situation where they don't really see eye to eye.
That is what I fail to understand, despite all the linkages that you have so ably described, the fact remains that the current situation says otherwise. There is a lack of understanding maybe from the Afghan side as to where they need to move forward and how they need to move forward, and while they are doing whatever they are doing, a lot of people across the world also need to understand why they are doing what they are doing. A lot of unanswered questions which I hope will be addressed or have been addressed during this visit. I have to go to my guest and then I'll come back to you. Sure. Amina Khan, thank you very much to have joined us. Our special envoy also meets with the interim foreign minister of the Afghan interim government, Mr. Muttaqi. Mr. Muttaqi is the same person who, in his first statement, when he came, this interim government came into power, said that the Afghan soil will not be used against any of its neighbors. A lot of years has passed, and his statement has been negated countless of times with the number of terrorist-related incidents that have emanated from the Afghan soil into Pakistan. Mr. Sadiq says Pakistan and Afghanistan need to synergize their efforts to foster regional economic development. Does Afghanistan understand or realize the potential that exists in synergizing its efforts with Pakistan? It's a win-win situation for Afghanistan, but despite that, it continues to harbor nefarious interests vis-a-vis Pakistan. Why is that so?
First of all, let me just say that I think the visit, excuse me, of Ambassador Sadiq is of immense importance. The last visit took place in December, and as you've seen, the relationship has obviously been following a very negative trajectory. So I'm so glad that this visit has taken place, and we are hopefully seeing some positive developments taking place even after the visit. But coming to your question, look, I think it's a very simple, answer to this. If the current dispensation in Afghanistan wants to be accepted and treated as a member of the international community, then therefore they have to adhere to certain international norms and obligations, and one is primarily the one that Mr. Muttaqi himself has quoted so many times, and the one that the dispensation agreed to in the Doha Agreement, which is not to allow Afghan soil to be used against any country, particularly the region, by terrorist entities. Now, time and again, we've had statements coming out of Kabul, primarily of denial of the presence of the TTP. But the fact that the current dispensation has offered negotiations between the Pakistani government and the TTP, the fact that they have also offered to relocate them, shows not only the leverage, but also the presence of the TTP. Therefore, I think it's very important to understand this aspect. Moreover, I think it's a very simple decision that the dispensation has to make in Afghanistan. If they want to be, a member of the international community, they have to adhere to these international expectations, and that is keeping your neighborhood secure and safe. And as you see, we have seen over the past, rather I would say since the ceasefire was concluded between Pakistan and the TTP, we've seen immense terrorist activities take place in Afghanistan. So I think the Afghan Taliban need to decide whether they want to have a secure and a stable neighborhood, in which Pakistan and Afghanistan are two very important neighbors, or do they want to depend on a temporary ally, which is the TTP, which, by the way, will eventually come to haunt them. Because if we look at this region, there are transnational terrorist groups operating, and the TTP is in cahoots with the ISKP and so many others. Therefore, I think the Afghan Taliban, I feel they've been slightly disingenuous on this particular issue, and they really haven't understood Pakistan's concerns. And I just want to add here that I think it's been more of a compartmentalized approach on the part of the Afghan Taliban, where they have kept certain regional countries happy in terms of addressing their terrorist concerns or threats, but not so much of Pakistan. And I think they underestimate the importance of this bilateral relationship that is so important not only for the region but more so for the countries of both the people.
All right, all right. Jauhar, Saleem Saab, I'll take something that Amina said, and she talked about, not understanding Pakistan's concerns, and secondly, compartmentalizing its approach vis-a-vis certain regional countries when it comes to the security paradigm of the region. These are two important points. What kind of commitments do you feel are required from Afghanistan in this context in order to foster a better relationship with Pakistan and also to look forward to peace in the region as well?
Yeah, I think they do understand our concerns quite clearly. It's a matter of not appreciating our concerns. It's a matter of not acting upon those concerns. You see, there are two types of terrorism that we are facing from there. One is the TTP related terrorism, and there we see in Afghanistan a lot of acceptability for TTP. In fact, there are analysts who would say that TTP, there are such, ideological kind of similarities there. Some people say that they're sort of, two sides of the same coin, and sort of, there's all that talk of very active cooperation between the Afghan Taliban and the TTP. On the other hand, we also have this BLA-related terrorism now emanating from Afghanistan, and that is also a major concern because in recent times we have seen the spate of terrorism in that area increasing by leaps and bounds. Now, in terms of, because this is now the umpteen number of times that Pakistan has, they made some commitments in the very beginning, those promises, and time and again those promises have been made. I remember that Afghan Shahjeh was at the IRS, and they again, just a few months ago, and they reiterated their promises. But unfortunately, nothing has come out of those promises because you see, the scope of and magnitude of terrorism, if anything, has increased now, in terms of what has been emanating from there. Now, Amina has talked about compartmentalization. So, okay, there's a bit of that, terrorism from there. At one point, there was, ETIM-related terrorism, sort of, the Chinese had their concerns and so, but there was nothing comparable to the terrorism that we have been facing. And what we believe is that, number one, the administration there, the Taliban government, they are not sort of, paying due attention to our concerns. And second of all, they have not really taken any active steps in terms of discouraging or sort of, blocking the sort of, the flow of that terrorism. And thirdly, they have not taken any steps in terms of not, providing safe havens, and in terms of the safe havens which are already there, removing those safe havens, or sort of, or changing their policy even in terms of those safe havens, and in terms of the support that the terrorist groups get from there. Now, in this particular visit, I think our special envoy has very candidly impressed upon them. What I see in this visit, that in terms of the tone of the meetings that have taken place so far, I think this is slightly more appreciation that Pakistan is taking it very, very seriously now. And this situation cannot really continue, because the thing, they have vital stakes. We have a lot of leverages. There's a multi-pronged strategy that we have employed. For instance, there's the leverage of trade, because much of their trade is through Pakistan. They don't really have any international recognition, and Pakistan is would be a very important part of their sort of, quest for international recognition if they want anything in future. Then again, we have employed three types of approaches: the bilateral approach, the regional approach, and the international approach. The regional approach, we have convinced the neighboring countries, because they also feel threatened by the terrorism that is sort of prospering in Afghanistan. It's not just Iran and China, but also Russia and the Stans, and also now there's certain groups there. Al-Qaeda is re-emerging there in Afghanistan, and there are countries beyond this region who are now feeling threatened. So that is there. So the regional approach through organizations such as SCO, there's a mechanism of Quad, there are multiple mechanisms there. But then again, there's the international approach. And now how does that work? Primarily through the United Nations system. There now Pakistan is a member of the United Nations Security Council. We have a very significant voice there. We have a non-permanent member presently for 2 years. And and Pakistan has time and again, voiced our concerns there. They're very clear UN resolutions. They're very clear tenets of international law, and we have been invoking those in terms of impressing upon Afghanistan that this cannot continue. So this is a very I would say a very comprehensive approach, and I hope that it will start bearing some fruit in the near future.
Then let's see whether it bears fruit or not, because Pakistan has been pledging time and again since quite a number of months and making the Afghan interim government understand the importance of retreating when it comes to its security paradigm. Amina, coming to you. United Nations Security Council, Ambassador Saab points out that Pakistan now is a non-permanent member for 2 years, and it is of course highlighting the important issues and includes Afghanistan. Does that count in the long run vis-a-vis Afghanistan? Can the UNSC or the members of the Security Council impress upon the Afghan interim government to do the needful? Mr. Bowler was recently in Afghanistan as well, where he was here to, for the release of a hostage, an American hostage that was present in Afghanistan since a number of months. Could discussions pave the way for making the Afghan interim government understand whatever it is doing vis-a-vis terrorism or security is the opposite of what maybe the US or the United Nations Security Council stand for?
Certainly, of course they can, but I actually feel that we have to move beyond statements. I mean, look, if you look at the trajectory of events since the Afghan Taliban have come into power, generally, if you have seen, it's been more about talk and less about action. Now, I'm not saying that any military action should be taken, certainly not, but I think more leverages need to be used to put pressure on the Afghan Taliban, because I feel that since the takeover has taken place, the international community has been bogged down in other areas, whether it's Ukraine or, unfortunately, the genocide we're seeing in Gaza, or, for example, the new administration that's come into power. So therefore, I feel that that willingness, collective willingness, is not there to put more pressure on the dispensation currently in Afghanistan. And also, I do agree with Ambassador Jauhar that certainly regional countries are on the same page when it comes to expectations from the Taliban, which primarily are CT. But again, how much effort has been put into a regional format to convince or compel, if I may say, the Afghan Taliban to deliver? Yes, we have these mechanisms in place, but still the SCO contact group on Afghanistan has yet to be revived. And I feel that the regional countries really need to have a collective approach, which we don't see in the form of a format. So I think more needs to be done. And I don't think we should, wait for, God forbid, a major, terrorist threat to emanate from Afghanistan for the international community to wake up. Because I always say that, Afghanistan is such a country that has always had global ramifications. Therefore, I think there has to be a collective approach. And I know it's not a very popular notion, but there are some, circles that are speaking about revisiting and going back to the Doha Agreement. Because if you look at the Doha Agreement, the only party that it has benefited has been primarily the Afghan Taliban. They really haven't come up to those pledges of reform or expectations that they had agreed to, and one of them is counterterrorism.
All right. Jauhar Saab, modalities of any future agreement between Pakistan and the Afghan government that could lead to peace, and as Amina points out, a collective regional approach. When we know that certain regional players that do not want stability in Pakistan and are waging proxy wars against Pakistan through the Afghan soil as well, how can we have a collective regional approach in your point of view under that, and what needs to be done to have that semi-collective approach? Because we know that whatever we do, there are certain regional players who will not adhere to an approach regarding Pakistan's security paradigm. How can we do that looking at the situation that has engulfed our region since the last couple of years?
As you have alluded, I think it's basically the Indians who are hampering the evolution of convincingly potent regional approach. And unfortunately, India has been involved in abetting and fomenting terrorism in Pakistan, sometimes through organizations which are present in Afghanistan. That is the unfortunate part. Now, yeah, of course, we need to do, we've had all these, the formats are there, by the way, the mechanisms are there, but it's just a question of putting, how to put more pressure, so that the Afghans start realizing that, it would not be in their interest anymore to continue with this policy. That is one thing. Secondly, kinetic operations or military means are a vital part of our repertoire. We have used that in the past. The kinetic operations have been. This is not our mode of choice, but if we have to, then we will use those. And so far as the international law is concerned, and the UNSC or United Nations resolutions are concerned, they clearly permit those, because in self-defense,
of course,
you can act, in terms of kinetic operations, and Pakistan has done that. So that is there as well. Now the third thing is, because you see, Afghanistan is still economically dependent quite significantly on the money that they get from the US. You'd be surprised to know that even in the last few years, they've had commitments of about $8 billion from the US.
Yes.
And actually, and at least $3 billion worth of cash was disbursed to
And to add to that,
Afghanistan.
this around $7 billion worth of arms and ammunition that was left by the US.
That was left already.
Yes.
That was not left by choice, but this money was given up post-Taliban government in Afghanistan. So the point is, that leverage is also there. If we are able to convince the Americans to use their leverage as well, because
But that is what Trump has been saying.
Exactly.
That he needs to understand why the money is going.
So I see a lot of possibilities of enhanced cooperation in this area. So far as the Doha Accord is concerned, we have to remember that this was an accord basically between the US and the Taliban. So it didn't really, if it's not really a UN-sponsored accord, or it's not a regional accord, or not an international accord. So if we have to revisit the Doha Accord, then it has to be through the Americans then, But in my view, we should explore all possible options,
All right.
ranging from the kinetic operations to the economic leverages, to the regional, international, and the UN approach, and any and also in terms of convincing them, which, for instance, this visit was in that direction, in terms of convincing them that, look, you have all these ambitions of connectivity, you have all these ambitions of promoting economic development, and and so that you have a vital stake in ensuring that you do not provide these safe havens to these terrorist groups. So I think it has to be a very holistic approach, and we'll have to see what works and what doesn't work.
All right. Well, Amina, I would like to understand, on the one hand, we have talks between the Pakistan and Afghan side. On the other hand, the terrorists emanating from the Afghan soil continue to wreak havoc in Pakistan. 16 Khalid were sent to hell recently between the 22nd and 23rd of March, while Ambassador Sadiq was in Afghanistan discussing the future of relations between the two brotherly and neighborhood countries. Is the Afghan perspective ever going to change? And in your point of view, because Ambassador Sadiq also is a very apt person to discuss with the Afghan people, because he understands Afghans much better than many of us do. Do you feel that change could be brought about in the Afghan mentality vis-a-vis terrorism in Pakistan? Let's not put the other things on the table, but vis-a-vis terrorism in Pakistan, could some change occur? And if so, will that change occur through non-kinetic or kinetic means?
The change has to, come within the dispensation. Again, they need to realize, as I said in the beginning, what is more important for them: to have a stable neighborhood where you have regional trade and connectivity, or do they want to again depend on such groups? It's a temporary alliance, and as I said, the TTP eventually, it's a matter of time. It could be 2 months, it could be 2 years, even 5 years. Eventually, the TTP will come to haunt the Afghan Taliban. And why do I say this? I say this because if you go back to the history of the Islamic State Khorasan province in the region, when they came to Afghanistan back in late 2014 and early 2015, the emirs of the ISKP were ex-TTP emirs. So therefore, the relationship exists, and it's just a matter of time. Therefore, I think the change has to come within the dispensation. There is no other way. Now, how do we achieve this? I think one is to consistently have bilateral dialogue. There have been times over the past 3 years where communication has completely stopped, and I think, that's a non-starter for both sides. There has to be communication. We've tried the kinetic operations. It's not like those haven't been already used, but what has it achieved? I think there has to be more of a, multi-pronged approach, a bilateral approach, a regional approach, and of course an international approach. And again, I think for me, the most convincing one will be a combination of the bilateral and the regional approach, where the Afghans need to understand that the security threats emanating from Afghanistan are collective. For example, the TTP is not just a Pakistani problem. It should not be viewed just as a Pakistani threat, but a regional threat. Similarly, ETIM, ISKP, and so on. And this can only happen when you have a mechanism that convinces the Afghan Taliban. Because if you see right now, engagements are taking place, and I'm talking about regional countries, agreements are being signed, visits are taking place. So where is the leverage? Where is the pressure on the Afghan Taliban? Therefore, I think there's a collective approach where the Afghan Taliban are told that there will be no more engagement unless and until you adhere to your promises of reform that were in the Doha Agreement. And I agree, Ambassador Jauhar, that it was an agreement that was signed between the US and the Taliban. But again, all regional countries and the international community were by default a part of it. So I think the promises that the Afghan Taliban made have to apply to the international community as a whole, including the region. So therefore, I think there has to be more pressure and push from the region, and I really don't see this happening. I don't see the appetite for it because every regional country is mending for itself, even though the threats are collective.
And certain countries, of course, in the region have their mandate to destabilize in the region. Ambassador Jauhar Saab, there were different statements that came from the Afghan Foreign Ministry and, of course, Ambassador Sadiq as well, which state that both countries have agreed to enhance high-level engagements, dialogue to strengthen bilateral relations, Pakistan's commitment to the ongoing engagement and mutually beneficial ties with the Afghan interim government. The Afghan Foreign Ministry adds that bilateral relations, political and economic cooperation, transit and people-to-people exchange between both countries were discussed. And but what I would like to understand is these. Is it all of this interlinked with a peaceful environment in the region? You can only have better people-to-people contact, or better cooperation, or transit trade, or better relations on the political arena as well, if this aspect of security is tackled in a proper and effective manner. Do you see that happening, or all of these remain statements and we will have some things happening like the opening of the Turkham border that has happened on a temporary phase, or other issues. But remember, a lot of the Afghans who are illegally present in Pakistan are still moving. There's a deadline that is present of the 31st of March as far as that is concerned. Is that going to add to the wows that the Afghan interior government so quote unquote has vis-a-vis Pakistan? Your take?
It's going to be challenging. It's not going to be easy. It's very clear on that. Like you said, of course, all these things can only, in a peaceful environment, mutual trust is a sine qua non for moving forward on all these areas that you've mentioned, whether it's trade or people-to-people contacts or development cooperation, partnership or connectivity or sort of, whatever you may say, any of the areas that you may mention. The point is that mutual trust can only be built upon a lack of sort of hostility in terms of whether it's a direct hostility or indirect hostility. So we see that as indirect hostility. Okay, on the face of it, the Afghanistan government is friendly towards Pakistan, and of course, we have sort of a great deal of friendliness towards them. But if they are going to support the terrorist groups in terms of the terrorist activities that they're carrying out in Pakistan, now that is an indirect hostility. That is actually, that is and will be termed anywhere in the world as a hostile act, right? And that is why sometimes it evokes a kinetic approach from Pakistan. When you have that, that is not the best environment to move forward in other areas. So it's, but like I said, in this particular visit, what we see different than the previous visit of Ambassador Sadiq himself is that sort of, the talks took place in a more constructive environment. So we hope that there's a better recognition of Pakistan's genuine desire and of Pakistan's genuine demand that Afghanistan does not provide any support to the terrorist groups, because this is, no country in the world would accept that, and countries have actually taken much more serious action in situations like this than what Pakistan has done so far. And it's only because of the so many linkages that we have, and because of our very keen desire to build, to build upon the cooperation that we have with Afghanistan, that we have showed restraint, because many other countries do not.
But there's a limit to any restraint, isn't there, Jauhar Sahab?
Say that again?
There is a limit to any restraint, isn't there?
No, that is true, and that's what I think in the last few months we've made it very clear to Afghan and to our Afghan sort of friends that look, there's, and that is why when you carry out the kinetic operations, that is a very clear expression of that. That okay, that restraint has exhausted.
Right.
So basically, but I hope, and this is not just our hope; it's our very sincere endeavor. And sort of this is the thrust of our diplomacy with Afghanistan as well, that we build up on the mutual trust. We sort of and we are able to convince them, through dialogue, and we don't have to use all of the options which have been used, of course, in sort of in various situations.
Right.
But that is not our preference. Our preference is
to engage with the Afghan interim government, to build on, to construct a peaceful relationship with Afghanistan. That is, if Afghanistan also relents to it and wants to do that and wants to move in the right direction. Amina, last question to you before we end the segment. Munir Akram Saab, who is our ambassador to the United Nations, says that the EP receives external support and financing from our principal adversary, and of course he was referring to India. He says Pakistan has faced the adverse impacts of the series of crises that Afghanistan has lived through during the past 40 years. It has hosted millions of Afghan refugees infected by its extremist groups and the inflow of arms and drugs, and has consistently advocated engagement and sought to broker an inclusive peace in Afghanistan during its 20-year conflict. I want a short answer. Has the Afghan government forgotten the decades of love, friendship and help and assistance that Pakistan has provided it? And if so, how can it be reminded?
Look, I'm just going to be a little blunt here. I think we need to be very pragmatic. And I think we need to move beyond, the terms that we often refer to the relationship as our Afghan brothers, or as President Karzai was very famously known for saying, conjoined twins. I think we need to come to the realization that despite the fact that Pakistan has done so much, the Pakistan and the Afghanistan bilateral relationship is one that is extremely complex and fragile at the same time. And I think at best, we just need to accept each other as two independent and sovereign states and work towards a workable relationship. Because this is not the beginning, and this is not the end. These problems are going to come up time and again, even if the TTP issue is resolved. Tomorrow there'll be issues on trade and whatnot. And so it's a difficult, question to answer, but all I can say is that I think we just need to be practical. And if we've done any good towards Afghanistan in the past, we shouldn't, keep on mentioning it, because the Afghans clearly seem to have forgotten it.
Thank you very much, Amina Khan, to have joined us, Director of the Center for Afghanistan, Middle East and Africa at the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad, discussing with us the future of Afghan relations in the wake of the visit of Ambassador Sadiq, who's a special envoy to Afghanistan from the Pakistani side, who was in Afghanistan discussing many important issues that exist between the two countries. Let's come to our second story, and that concerns the Middle East situations, with particular reference to Gaza. 534 days have passed since this conflict began, but despite a ceasefire that was still, maybe is there, the state of affairs is not as rosy as it was made to be in the last few days. We've been joined, we continue to be joined by Jauhar Saleem Saab, former Foreign Secretary, but we also have now been joined by Farah Naz, Dr. Farah Naz, Foreign Affairs expert. Dr. Farah, thank you very much to have joined us as well. We will discuss with you. Kindly be patient with us. I know we've taken a lot of time in our first segment. Jauhar Saab, Pope Francis calls on Israel to cease its attack on Gaza and asks for a definitive ceasefire. He says he's saddened by the resumption of the intense Israeli bombardment of Gaza Strip with so many deaths and injuries. Thousands of Israelis march in Tel Aviv to protest on this cessation of ceasefire and continuity of hostilities. They want their hostages back. Do these statements, do these protests, not the first time that such protests have happened, have any impact whatsoever on these Israeli brutalities that continue as we speak?
You would recall I had said here on my program that this notion that this sort of, this temporary ceasefire or the ceasefire agreement which had been sort of understanding which had been agreed upon, that would bring sort of, peace in that region, because the 3 stages, stage 1, 2, 3. I had said that stage 1 will happen, but after that we'll run into great challenges. There will be a problem, because I didn't really see Hamas and Israel coexisting peacefully, and that's what I've said in very clear words, and that is the key problem. Now the other dimension is that the Israelis, they're putting all this pressure now, these very sort of severe bombing campaigns and sort of ground actions as well, to put pressure on Hamas to release more hostages. That is the strategy right now. They are not very serious on sort of the setup that was kind of discussed in terms of the day after, because they do not want Hamas, first of all, not only to have not any role in that setup, but they want to ensure that Hamas's capacity is destroyed. And that hasn't really happened so far. So that is why I don't really see an end to it, unfortunately. The second thing is that in Netanyahu, and I had said that on many occasions, that this is a battle of survival for Netanyahu.
Political survival.
Exactly. It's political survival, but more than that, because he might end up in jail if he wouldn't politically survive, because there are cases against him. Corruption cases against him, other cases against him. And, if there were elections, he was bound to lose. He's quite unpopular in Israel, as these demonstrations also point out. So that is there. So Netanyahu's keen desire, and his endeavor is to continue this conflict. That suits him very much.
All right.
He's been able to, now what has he accomplished so far, which he can sell to his people? He can say, okay, I have been able to, really incapacitate Hamas to sort of, to a great extent. I've been able to incapacitate Hezbollah with the Houthis as well, like they're sort of, Houthis' capacity has been damaged. So that is what he has shown to his people. Then he can also show to his people that, look, what I did with Iran, the type of attacks that they carried out into the strikes and everything. Now there's this nuclear issue with Iran, which is interlinked to this Gaza situation.
And he's asking for talks with Iran, and they want to have talks with Iran on this very issue, which I don't know where it will all lead, but I'll come to that in a bit. Dr. Farah, so many people are still being, as we speak, on Saturday 32 people were killed, around 19 people plus were killed in the last few hours as well, and the brutalities continues. To top of that, what is happening in the West Bank as well, whether it be through the land grabs by the Israeli settlers, whether it be through the raids in different areas across the occupied West Bank in the recent hours and in the recent days as well. The strategy, the Israeli strategy, is something that Ambassador Saab pointed towards. What is the Israeli strategy? Do you feel any attempt at peace has now been completely eroded? Do you still feel there's some chance of a peace deal between the two sides? And if so, what will be the conditionalities of any future peace deal between the two sides?
Thank you, Omar, for having me on your show. So first of all, when you talk about peace deal, I don't see Israel is in any position to have a peace deal with the people of Gaza or the Palestinians in general. If they were interested in peace deal, they would have never ever killed this many people and conducted genocide, which is talk of the town and everybody is talking about it. Even Israel is reluctant to call it a genocide, where it is contested through some of the Western leadership and even people who are representing the United Nations, and they are calling it a genocide. So first thing first, will Israel be held accountable for killing these number of people? And who is going to hold them accountable? Is there going to be international law put in place where Israel is going to be questioned for all the atrocities that it has committed or all the blunders that it has committed in Gaza? Now coming over to whether there's going to be a peace deal in the future as well or not, I unfortunately don't see it. Where the recent Trump talks that is coming up, they're more talking about cleansing, ethnic cleansing of Gaza. I can't say it directly, but indirectly between the lines, this is what has been shared with the world, that we want to clean Gaza one way or the other. And they are also interested in dislocating the people of Gaza from that territory and probably moving them to Egypt and other places as well, where those countries are probably not in a position to accept it. And even the people of Gaza are not willing to move from their own territory, which belongs to them. There are several videos viral on social media platforms where Netanyahu is speaking about the map allocation of Gaza, and he is trying to display that this small territory, which is like, called Israel, and when the people of who are supporting the Gaza conflict, or they want to finish this war, they are claiming that from the river to the sea, Palestine is going to be free. So they are basically claiming that they want to get rid of Israel. And he said this is not going to happen. And he's comparing the territory of Israel with the Middle East and with the Gulf and all those territories. So the entire justification that he is providing is baseless. On top of that, the recent developments, which is really of significance to me, is that the families of all those people who are in the custody of the Hamas, those families are saying that Netanyahu is utilizing this conflict for its own political presence. So I think these kind of statements coming from the people who are affected, whose families has been affected with this conflict, I think this is really huge. And now everyone is aware of this is not a war where Netanyahu and his team, they are really bringing justice to the October 7th attacks. It's not about it. Yes, whatever happened on that day is not justified, but whatever happened after that, it is not acceptable by all ways and means. Where the number of killings, where there are children whose videos, I think I can't even sleep due to those little infants' videos, whose bodies have been badly damaged with the infrastructure damages and the bombs and everything. So who is going to pay for the price that Netanyahu and his team has done so far in this conflict? Who is going to hold them accountable and bring them to justice in the International Court of Law, in the International Court of Justice?
The ICJ did did bring
Correct.
them to justice, but that justice was never implemented in letter and principle. There are certain countries where, of course, Netanyahu can't go because he'll be arrested. Otherwise, nothing concrete has happened.
Nothing has happened because Netanyahu got support of the international community, and among those, United States is at the forefront. Unfortunately, President Trump is blindly supporting Netanyahu in this war, which is not a good gesture from a newly formed government of Trump administration. We were expecting that when there were talks happening about the ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, so there were expectation that maybe some ceasefire deal will be taking place between Hamas and or the people of Gaza and Netanyahu as well. But unfortunately, it never happened and it never materialized. The reason behind that is because the objectives are very clear. Whatever they want to do in Ukraine, I think the world is very aware of. They just want to keep an eye on, and they were eyeing on the minerals and the resources that Ukraine is offering. But in Gaza, what Gaza is offering, they does not have resources, they does not have minerals, but they have the territory. So they just want to clean that territory from the people of Palestine, from the people of Gaza, and rebuild and reconstruct the way they want to, and put people of their own interest over there. So it's like the entire ballgame of this war, this conflict is different in both wars. So that's why we could see that the ceasefire deals and talks that is prevailing in the discussion of the Trump administration, they're completely different when it comes to the Gaza war and when it comes to the Ukraine war. I won't say I'm strongly supporting the Ukraine war ceasefire, because I think there should be an end to conflict. And in this 21st century, we should come to terms where we can peacefully talk to each other rather than fighting, arguing, and killing each other. I think enough of damage the world has seen, and we just need to come. But the problem here is who is going to bring them to terms with each other, where Netanyahu is so determined to keep his political objectives intact. He can go to any extreme, and we have seen those extremes, that neither women were safe, neither children were safe, nor the humanitarian assistance programs were safe in Gaza. All programs have been suspended, and after the ceasefire, the recent one, the atrocities have multifolded. So what's going to happen? Who is going to bring them to justice? Nobody is going to bring them to justice until the United States tell Israel, tell Netanyahu in particular, that you need to behave. And there is some limitation to even war crimes as well, because all definitions of war crimes, it fully justifies that yes, Netanyahu has committed act of genocide in Gaza, and this genocide needs to be brought to justice, no matter what. Whoever has done it, they need to be brought to justice. But unfortunately, things are going in a very bizarre way that nobody is able to control it. Even UN seems to be in a very difficult situation where it's not able to ask any one of them that you have to behave. We have seen the way there is a decrease in the fundings to the United Nations programs, and they're unable to even the refugee programs and even all other programs, their funding has been badly affected. So of course, everybody, every institution, they are very careful and very concerned about what's going to happen to them if they are supporting, or if they are standing, or they are going against the will of the powerful countries.
All right, thank you so very much, Dr. Farah Naz, to have joined us, Foreign Affairs expert, Dr. Farah Naz joining us, and thank you for being so patient with us during the course of this segment as well. Coming to you, Jauhar Saleem Saab, my last question is manifold. Jordan's foreign ministry condemns the decision by Israel to set up a government agency to forcibly displace Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. This is something that has already been talked about by Trump. He is also wanting to make Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. Then Mike Waltz, who's Donald Trump's advisor, says the president's proposal to forcibly resettle Palestinians from Gaza is a practical idea. A record number of new housing societies are also being constructed in the occupied West Bank, and Bezalel Smotrich, who's the far-right finance minister, says that this is a very good idea, and he says Israel is leading a revolution in the area as well. Raids and arrests are happening at the same time in the occupied West Bank. Thousands and thousands have been arrested. Their situation is also despicable, to say the least. And to add to that, we have no aid coming into Palestine from the last 21 plus days. There is no electricity. The hospitals are in a despicable state. The hospitals are now being bombarded upon for whichever reason possible. Where is all of this going?
Yeah, firstly, I think it was interesting to hear that Israel has the support of international community, because they don't. I mean, Israel this time what we have seen around the world, we saw and we witnessed condemnations coming from so far as Brazil on one side to Japan, and all the countries in between almost. In fact, even South American countries took such exceptions that the Brazilians, they withdrew their ambassador from Israel at one point. And many other countries, even the European countries, they took strong measures in certain instances, for instance, recognizing Palestine. Multiple
Spain?
countries did that. Multiple countries, four, five countries did that. And they stopped the shipping of armaments to Israel and put other took other measures as well. Then we saw the resolutions that were passed in the UNSC, unprecedented, where even the US abstained and allowed the resolutions to be passed. We saw
But
what
it's
happened.
unmaintainable.
Yeah, because the Israelis said they were not under Chapter 7, they were under Chapter 6. Then we had ICC rulings, we had ICJ rulings, and we had countries in Europe stating clearly that if Netanyahu comes, visits or is found in their territory, they will comply with the UN, the ICJ rulings or ICC rulings and arrest him. So all that was there. But what it showed to us was that so far, as Israel has the US support, it can continue with its this policy of impunity. And Netanyahu is known for that. Netanyahu, in fact, in many instances doesn't even care about the US administrations. He was not in very good relations with Obama. He was not on good relations with Biden as well. But at the same time, there was not much they could do against him because there's a bipartisan support for Israel in the US. It's a cornerstone of their foreign policy. So even the presidents become sometimes a little helpless when dealing with Israel. With Trump, it's a different situation because Trump enjoys a great deal of personal rapport with Netanyahu, and Trump was the architect of the Abraham Accords during his first tenure, and he even supported Israel's quest for making the Jerusalem the capital, and he shifted the embassy there. So, and even now, Trump has lent very strong support to Israel whenever they've needed that. So that is that part that, they say all politics is local, and we've seen that, very much in this whole tragic saga, which has now lasted for 500 days, that it's all about Netanyahu's political survival. He doesn't care, despite all the pressure that is within Israel, despite all the demonstrations, despite all that has happened everywhere in the world. He doesn't care. And he continues with the same impunity that we've witnessed in the last many, now more than a year, almost approaching year and a half. So that, but like I said, what we'll see, unfortunately still, is that Israel will not stop its campaign unless they are able to get their objectives. And their objectives are pretty complex, and they're not very easy to achieve as well. And that is the other problem, because if they want to incapacitate Hamas completely, that has not happened so far. They claim that they have taken out 17,000 Hamas operatives, but we see that Hamas is still there. They still have thousands of operatives. They still have weapons and stuff.
The fact is, one should not forget the whole plan for the greater Israel as well. And I think the whole strategy that we are seeing vis-a-vis Yemen, vis-a-vis Lebanon, the bombardments that are happening in Syria as well, is all part of this greater plan. And I just wish against all hope that somehow, somewhere, the US, withdraws its support for Israel for whichever reason. And that will be the day that things might start moving in the right direction. Thank you very much, Ambassador Jauhar Saleem Sahab, to have stayed with me during the entire show, to have discussed Pakistan-Afghan relations, and to have discussed the Palestinian conflict as well. These are two very important topics that are very dear to our hearts because of A, we are Muslims, B, our relations with Afghanistan, and C, of course, the holy month of Ramadan, which portrays a month that needs to be peaceful. But instead, we see hostilities that are happening and hostilities that are directed towards Muslims. Thank you very much, sir, again, to have joined us. Last story, and that concerns the World Tuberculosis Day that is being observed across the world, including in Pakistan today. This year's theme is Yes, We Can End TB, Commit, Invest, deliver. Indeed, it's a bold call. Indeed, a lot of proper action needs to be taken. But all that action can only be taken if there's a collective resolve to do something. Whether it be, the Afghan situation, Palestine, Ukraine, till such time that there is a collective response from the world to do something for the betterment of the society and nations, only then can we achieve the needful. And tuberculosis is just one of an example of so many other issues that confront the world, including these conflicts that are also present in these regions. The devastating, coming back to TB, the devastating health, social, economic consequences are very important. So we need to step up these our efforts to end the global tuberculosis pandemic. This day, before I end, marks the day in 1882 when Dr. Robert Koch announced that he had discovered the bacterium that caused tuberculosis, which opened the way towards diagnosis and curing the disease. Now let's move towards eliminating this disease from the world and eliminating terrorism from the world as well. I'll add to that as a joiner. With that, we come to an end of today's Newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new story segments that pertain to us here in Pakistan. Stay safe, have a blessed fast and Ramadan. These are the last days, and we'll see you inshallah tomorrow.